Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Julian Casablancas and The Voidz record, Tyranny. Julian Casablancas and The Voidz is the newly formed musical project spearheaded by singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, famed frontman of the New York rock band The Strokes, Julian Casablancas. The Strokes, one of my favorite rock bands of the 2000s, their first two records are fantastic. And in this period of time they released their first two records, they really could do no wrong for me. But then their third full-length LP came down the pipe. It was a little underwhelming. A hiatus for the band came shortly after. They returned, and the two records they have dropped since have been met with pretty lukewarm responses, negative responses. The reception has been pretty mixed, even though I did like their return record. However, before the Strokes reconvened, there were a slew of Strokes solo and side projects that dropped, some of which I enjoyed, and Julian Casablancas had a solo album out as well. And I'm just stipulating here, but maybe the Strokes are on hiatus status or close to hiatus status once again, now that Julian has this side project to focus on. At first, the name of this project had me a little skeptical. Julian Casablancas, putting his name at the front of all of it. He really wants you to notice that he is in the band. You've got the plus sign, the word Voidz, spelled with a Z. I'm also simultaneously wondering if this is like a little bit of a reference to Richard Hell. However, the music from the first song to drop from this album, Human Sadness, really spoke for itself. This track was 10 minutes of heavy, fuzzy, psychedelic bliss. Between all the noisy and dense production and the buried drums, the guitars, the synthesizers, the kind of strange vocoder effects on Julian's voice occasionally on this track, this song was strange, it was experimental, it was beautiful, not to mention it was 10 minutes long. It was like listening to the Strokes perform a medley of new songs for an underwater ghost ship underneath a full moon. Then you take that audio and you record it onto the nastiest, grimiest, oldest, dustiest VHS in your attic. This song was long-winded, but each moment was more interesting than the next. It was really a multi-faceted track. It had a lot of parts to it. And overall, I just thought it was a great, exciting song. I thought going into this record, this was probably going to be a standout, a bit of a sore thumb. And that was true, even though Tyranny is not just one 10-minute lo-fi psych pop odyssey after another. It still is a very dense, diverse, strange, and intriguing album, with tracks that blend synth punk, post-punk, noise pop, lo-fi music. The sonic surrealism of this album, it's fresh, it's modern. There are points where it reminds me a little bit of an old Ariel Pink album or even like a Flaming Lips record, but way, way, way darker. And the distortion on the drums, on the synths, on the guitars, the layers of all these synths and guitars, plus the miscellaneous noises and effects and vocal snippets. This album is so hard to pull apart. There's so much going on at any given time. Right from the start of this LP with Take Me in Your Army, which is a very slow, serene, beautiful track that has this just wall of synths and guitars and vocals that are constantly shifting over this one drum loop. And even though this track and many others on here follow a verse, chorus, verse structure, many of these tracks are padded out with the strangest guitar solos or synth solos or just musical interludes. And even though there's only one Human Sadness on this record, I do think the entire album as a whole shares a quality with that song in that it is a little long-winded. Julian Casablancas and The Voidz just unapologetically churn out 6, 7, 5-minute songs, one after another. So these are not exactly concise, really straight into the point, no BS, no filler pop tunes. However, the end result is pretty aggressive, explosive, exciting. Songs like Crunch Punch, Mad, Where Eagles Fly, Business Dog, just hard-hitting drum beats and guitar riffs everywhere, and Julian vocally, he's so over the top, especially on Crunch Punch. He's just letting loose all over this album on numerous tracks. He really sounds like his usual self, but way less in control and in a good way. And this LP can be ultra aggressive, but it has finesse to it too, which is displayed on the opening track, it's displayed on Human Sadness. Julian and the Voidz can play it soft or subtle or beautiful as well. There are some tracks in this track listing as well that get incredibly weird, like Father Electricity. This song has a beat that is almost Latin in flavor. It's like listening to Latin music played through a Game Boy or something, and then mixed with synths and guitars and drums. And the chorus, the instrumentation there goes almost tropical as soon as that change comes up. And there's really sinister melody on this song too. There's some synth glitches worked into the mix here. There are guitar solos that are simultaneously sunny and filthy, and Julian Casablancas is scatting. Yes. Even though I do like this song, it is a highlight for me on this record. It does beg the question, is this album just a little too indulgent? I think that really depends on your patience level. I think that depends on how much of a fan you are of Julian's music and the Strokes, but yes, it can. I think indulgence is maybe this album's most glaring flaw. Even though in a way it's also this record's greatest asset, because its eccentricity and its will to experiment is what makes it so enjoyable to begin with. For the first half of this record, indulgence really serves to make this album entertaining. But in the second half of this record, it almost uniformly hurts all the tracks in some kind of way. And when a song on this record is boring, it's boring for 5 or 6 minutes. It's not like a quick few minutes of just mundaneness. It lasts. Songs like Dare I Care or Xerox, where the beat on the song actually resembles that of a copy machine. Or the song Johann von Bronx. I enjoy the instrumentals on these tracks, but for whatever reason, Julian's most underwhelming singing lands on these 3 songs. His vocal melodies seem way less concise, his inflections seem kind of just like amateur, and he's just kind of doing all this off the top of his head. Just consistently, Julian's vocals on the second half of this record, they just feel really strung out and blasé. And it's sort of disappointing given the creative melodies and the good instrumentals, the interesting production. Despite what flaws are very glaring and are very upfront and in my face, at the end of the day, I did end up really enjoying this record. I think it's a fun album. I think it's an interesting album. And I do understand why most people wouldn't feel that way, especially from a contextual point of view. I think Julian Casablancas is way too mainstream to be accepted for doing something this weird, both by experimental music fans and people who are fans of him that want to hear him do catchy, straightforward, poppy rock music. At the end of the day, I don't think this album is going to please very many people, but I can at least say, a lot like the album The Strokes returned with, Angles, it did please me. I'm feeling a strong 7 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Julian Casablancas and The Voidz, forever.